We're about a quarter way through the college football regular season, so it's time to talk about some players that desperately need a ratings update in college football 25. Now, I know a lot of people have been asking me, when are we getting roster updates? When are we getting ratings updates? They said they were going to update the game a little bit this year in terms of rosters. We're about 5 weeks into the season now. Where are the updates? Now, we don't know for sure exactly when the update is coming, but it should be very, very soon. It should be within the next couple of weeks at least, because they said they would update the ratings multiple times throughout the season. So for me, that means either a quarter of the way through the season or about a third of the way through the season, which we're now at about the third way point of the season. I don't think they're going to only give us 2 updates, which would mean at the halfway point and then at the end. So we should be getting this update very soon, but I want to talk about, in my opinion, the 10 players that to me need the biggest update the most. Now, I'm not going to cover every single player that's playing great this year. This update is probably going to have upwards of 1,000 players that get a ratings update, whether it goes higher or lower. There's so many players in this game, and the fact that they're only doing these updates every so many weeks, it's going to be a much bigger update than what we see when we see ratings updates in Madden, since they do those every single week. So there's likely going to be 1,000 plus players that get changed around. I can't mention everybody that's having a great year. There's a ton of players having great years. I just want to talk about the 10 players that I like the most, the 10 players that I like to watch that are jumping off the screen at me the most, who I think desperately need to go up in the ratings. Now, if you are new to the channel and you don't want to miss out on that ratings update when it officially drops, or any of the other updates surrounding this game, because we get multiple updates for it every single month, make sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon on so you don't miss any of those important videos when they drop. The first guy I want to start with is Cam Ward, one of the leading Heisman candidates. Miami has looked really good this year. They did just have that controversial ending against Virginia Tech, one of the wildest finishes to a game we've seen in a while. But one thing is for sure, Cam Ward has been balling this year, and while he does have a good rating at 89 overall, the fact that he is one of the leading Heisman candidates, I say one of, because there's 3 or 4 guys right now that you could argue are in a pretty tight race. He's one of those guys. He definitely deserves to be bumped up into the 90s somewhere. He has really been leading this team, playing very well. He's got about 1,800 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. And on top of that, he has about 150 rushing yards and a couple of rushing TDs as well. He's definitely one of the bigger name guys that a lot of people are excited about this year, and he's definitely one guy that will be going up when the update comes out, and he definitely deserves to go up multiple points. The next guy we got to talk about is the cover boy, Travis Hunter. Now look, I know when it comes to Colorado, you either love him or you absolutely hate him. There seems to really be no in between, and right now, look, Colorado is having a good season. A lot of people are curious how they're going to finish out as the schedule gets a little bit tougher, but honestly, I think Colorado is going to continue to win. I don't think they're going to win like 9 or 10 games, but I think they could get 7, maybe 8. Maybe that's a stretch, but I was really impressed with how good they looked against UCF. But one thing is clear here on this team is that Travis Hunter is a bona fide star. He is going to be a top 10 draft pick, probably a top 5 draft pick. What position is he going to play in the NFL? Nobody knows. He might dabble in a little bit of both. I think a lot of people are leaning cornerback because even though he looks really good as a receiver, he's better as a cornerback. Like, he is just amazing as a cornerback. He rarely even gets tested because of how good he is. And then when he does get tested, he gets an interception a good bit of the time because his ball skills are just so crazy. Now, he is a 95 overall, so there's not really much room for him to go up, but he is looking like the clear-cut best player in college football. Now, some people will argue, well, can a receiver / cornerback be the best player because QBs are more important? You know, if you want to argue that, that's fine. But as a guy that is playing on both sides of the ball, playing every snap, which I don't think enough people are giving credit for just how absurd it is to play every snap of a game and still play it at a high level on both sides of the ball. You know, he's doing that, and he's top 5 in receiving yards. He's putting up a lot of touchdowns, but he's also not really giving up a lot on defense. When he is tested, he gets interceptions a good bit of the time, so it's almost like you can't even really look his way a lot of the games because you're just trying to attack other people because there's other weak spots on that defense. Travis Hunter is not one of them, so you don't want to go that way. But with how he's played this year, he is definitely currently in that Heisman running. We kind of have to see how good can Colorado finish out, right? Because if they only win 7 games, it's going to be hard to give a Heisman to a guy on a team that only wins 7 games if you have a QB on a team that goes undefeated or only loses once, right? That's going to be the thing. Will he win the Heisman? That's going to be a little bit tougher, but to just say he's the best player in college football, I don't think that would be a stretch at this point. So he definitely is going to probably bump up, even if it's just 1 or 2 points. He's played good enough to deserve it. Now, really quickly before we continue on, I do want to mention that we are still sponsored by Underdog. They've been a huge supporter of the channel, and if you like sports and you like winning money, money, then you've got to be on Underdog playing their pick'em game. All you got to do is pick higher or lower on player stats, and if they hit, you can win some good money. But the best part about Underdog Fantasy is they give you free plays and free money to play with that sign up. And during the NFL season, they have a ton of specials. For example, for this Thursday's upcoming game, they're going to give you Kirk Cousins to get a single yard, meaning all he has to do is get 1 yard and that's it, you win. If you want to wait and play on Sunday, they're going to give you Dak Prescott to get a single yard. And for next Monday night's game, they're going to give you Patrick Mahomes. And basically, no matter when you sign up, even if it's weeks from now, there's going to always be a free play just like this for you to take advantage of. They'll give you a star player to get a single yard. And if you sign up using my code RAY, R-A-Y, they'll also give you up to $1,000 in bonus cash at sign up, and you just simply can't beat that. Next up, we've got to move on to Ashton Jeanty. If there's ever a player that we need to talk about, it's this guy right here. I don't think anybody's having a better start to the season than this running back from Boise State. This guy has been, I think, the most fun to watch. He went from being maybe, I don't know, RB3, RB4 at the beginning of the season in terms of maybe where he would go in the draft to being like the clear-cut RB1. There's like no doubt in my mind that this guy is going to be RB1 now, just after what we've seen from a few weeks. This guy breaks every tackle. It's like you can't bring him down. His highlight plays this season, he's breaking 4, 5, 6 tackles. He's just like a pinball, and he's fast on top of that. This guy's stats are absolutely insane. They've played 5 games. He has 845 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, averaging 10 yards per carry. He's not really doing much in the receiving game, which I thought he would do a little bit more, but he doesn't need to because he's dominating on the ground. His worst game of the season so far, he only got 127 yards and no touchdowns. That's his worst game so far. I think this guy needs to be bumped to like 95 or 96. That's how good he's been playing, maybe even higher. He's probably been the most fun player to watch, and I can't wait to see what he does throughout the rest of the season. The next guy we got to talk about is Jalen Milroe. And look, if you play College Football 25, this is probably the last guy you actually want to get a ratings increase because he's already so OP in this game. Alabama is good, and this guy is a problem to stop, being 91 speed and being accurate, having good throw power, all of that. But look, he might be the leading candidate after his performance against Georgia. Now, before that game, I think you could have argued it was maybe more Jeanty or Hunter that were slightly in the lead, maybe even Cam Ward. But I think after that Georgia game, if there was a vote right now today, he would probably win it. Now, of course, it's still a very long season, so we don't know who's going to win it right now. We don't know who's going to win what games or if he's going to continue playing this well, but he's been pretty solid to start the year. He's definitely looked improved from last year. Now, his numbers passing wise might not look that crazy through the first few games of the season. He's got almost 1,000 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, only 1 interception though, so he's not turning the ball over. But when you factor in his rushing, he has almost 300 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, so 18 total touchdowns. That's really where you're seeing the boost come in. It's not so much that he's passing the ball well, which he is. He's not lighting it up through the air, but he's passing well through the air and he's not turning it over. But when you look at on the ground, the fact that he's got 8 rushing touchdowns and 300 rushing yards, that's really where he's making his presence felt much more. So I don't know that he's going to get a major ratings bump, but definitely a guy that deserves to go up a point or two at least because of how he's played so far. The next guy up is Jackson Dart, the QB of Ole Miss. Now, they just had a terrible loss this week, right? There's no doubt about it. That was a game that they did not look good in and they should not have lost. But it's still early in the season. Jackson Dart is still in that Heisman running, right? If we're talking top 10, he's still definitely in the top 10, but I think, you know, he's no higher than 5 right now after that loss, and then especially factoring in what the other players are doing, but he's still a guy that we have to watch out for the rest of the year. Like if Ole Miss wins the rest of their games and he dominates, he definitely still has a shot at that award. But if we're talking about numbers, he's looked really good so far this year. 1,800 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and he's also got 112 yards on the ground and 3 rushing touchdowns. So he's not doing the damage on the ground that Jalen Milroe is, but he's still a threat on the ground and he's giving you some production there as well. Next up, we've got to talk about the freshman Nico Iamaleava. We have to talk about him because he's looked pretty good. Now, obviously, we already know he's good because he's coming in as a freshman at an 86 overall, but I definitely think he needs a bit of a bump. Now, I'm not going to say his numbers are going to blow you away, but for a freshman, he's definitely been playing, I think, above his rating. He's got about 900 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and on the ground, he's done a little damage as well, over 100 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I don't think he needs a crazy bump, but I do think he's been playing very well, and I think that as the season goes on, he's going to continue to kind of stack those numbers up. Tennessee's offense has looked really good. And again, while he might not blow you away in the way that some of the other QBs are, like Jackson Dart, who's been around for a while, I mean, he's doing really well, and I definitely think he deserves a slight bump to be a little bit higher than that 86 overall. Now, if we're talking freshman, we've got to talk about Jeremiah Smith, another one of the most fun players to watch this year. I said Ashton Jeanty was fun to watch. This guy is probably just as fun to watch. Now, again, we knew coming in this was going to be a good player. He's coming in at an 84 overall, 94 speed. We know that he has expectations. We know that Ohio State is a wide receiver factory. I like to joke on Twitter, I like to poke fun, and I'm like, LSU's the real wide receiver lately. We've got Chase and Jefferson and Malik Neighbors and all these guys, and Ohio State fans are always pushing back, and Alabama fans chime in there too. Look, the truth is Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, all three of those schools, whoever you want to call wide receiver they all produce elite wide receivers, and this is just another one in those crop of OSU receivers to come along. Jeremiah Smith, we just saw this weekend, he made two of the best catches you'll ever see, and he just did them in the same game like it was nothing. These new receivers that are coming in every year, it just seems like they're more and more impressive. They're doing crazier and crazier things. This guy, deserves to be bumped, maybe 3 points. He's playing that well. He's looking like the best receiver on the team as a freshman. Now, he's only got 19 catches, but what he does with those catches says a lot. He's got 364 yards, 5 touchdowns. And again, it's not just the numbers. If you look at some of his best plays so far in this early season, it's just highlight play after highlight play. He's making tough catches. The degree of difficulty on some of these catches is just showing you the level of receiver he is. And then when you take into account that he's a freshman, like freshmen are not supposed to come out and perform this way. Even if they're playing against a terrible team, right? You got to take into account this guy was just in high school last year. These guys are supposed to come along a little bit slower than this. So to see a guy like this, even if he goes out and dominates a horrible college team, this guy is a few months removed from being in high school and he's out here dominating like this. That means something. So imagine how good this guy is going to be in 2 years in his junior season. Speaking of freshman receivers that need to go up, here's another guy from another one of those wide receiver factories, Alabama, Ryan Williams. And we could just talk about his game he just had against Georgia. That game alone, the catch that he made, one of the toughest catches you'll ever see. Just how he had to contort his body, the fact that he was able to control himself, keep his feet down, and then not only secure the catch, but score a touchdown on it. One of the best catches you'll ever see. And again, this is a guy, he's 17 years old. So when we say, a few months removed from high school, not only is he a few months removed from high school like Smith, this guy's only 17 years old. Like when I think about what I was doing at 17 years old and then I watch somebody like this, it's just amazing that somebody that young can be this good already. Now, early in the season, only 16 catches, but again, look at what he's done on those 16 catches. 462 yards and 5 touchdowns. So actually, he's technically having a better season as a receiver than Jeremiah Smith is because he has less catches, more yards, same amount of touchdowns. Both of those guys have been a lot of fun to watch. In 2 years when they're juniors and they're, having that last season and they're getting ready for the draft, it's probably going to be a very big argument which guy you take first. Let's just stick with the wide receiver position. We got to talk about Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. Going back to another Ole Miss player here. This guy has been statistically the best receiver so far this college season. Now, whether you want to say he's the best talent or whatever, we can always make that argument. There's a lot of guys you could argue there. But production-wise, this guy has been lighting it up. 49 catches, 800 yards. We've only played 5 games. So what Ashton Jeanty's kind of done on the ground, at least yards-wise, this is who's done it through the air. Trey Harris, 800 yards. Only 5 touchdowns. I say only, only 5 touchdowns is still very good. But when you compare it to 800 yards, you feel like he'd probably have more touchdowns on top of that. But that's not a knock. He's having an amazing year. He's leading the league in receiving right now. He's a 90 overall, but he definitely deserves a bump because of his performance so far this year. We got to go to the defensive side of the ball. This has been a very offensive-heavy video outside of Travis Hunter, who does play both sides. I'm not going to lie, it's mostly offensive players I'm going over, but I got to give the defense some love here. Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College leads the country in sacks right now. 8 sacks through a handful of games is very impressive, and there's obviously some other guys that are doing good in this department as well. Antoine Powell for Virginia Tech has 7 sacks as well, so he's another mention there to throw in. But Boston College has been pretty impressive to start the year. They look really solid, and this is their best player. And at an 85 overall, they have 8 sacks already this year. Yeah, this guy needs to be bumped a little bit. Give him up to like an 88, 89. Heck, maybe even go up to a 90. I mean, it's up to EA, but this guy needs some love. He's been showing out, and if he's already got 8 sacks, who knows where he ends the year at. I'm sure it's gonna at least be over 12. I think you get to like 13 13, 14 sacks for this guy, maybe even more. We'll see, but he's been impressive. He definitely needs a bump. Now, I know I said I was going to do 10 players, but I feel like I got to mention a few more. I just have to. We got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. Again, I know Colorado, you love him, you hate him. I don't care about none of that. I care about the production. Shedeur has shown improved this year. He's been playing very well. And again, the Colorado offensive line is not the best offensive line in the world. A lot of times he kind of has to make crazy plays happen. He can't stay in the pocket like he wants to. Shedeur is a pure pocket passer. He's not a guy that really wants to run. He can run a little bit if need be, but he wants to play within the pocket, go through his progressions. And when the O-line gives him time to do that, he looks good. He makes the good throws. Is he a perfect QB? No, but he's still a guy that right now is looking like a first round pick if the season continues the way that it is. Now, I know Colorado, they're 4-1. They've been playing very well. They just had a really good game against UCF. They're going to probably drop some more games. They're going to have some ugly games. It's going to happen because of how the team is built, but they're playing better than people expected them to. They're playing better than last year, and Shedeur is one of the reasons for that. He's at 1,600 pass yards, 14 TDs, only 3 interceptions. He's not playing bad football at all. He's already a 93. He's already the highest rated QB in the game along with Carson Beck, but I think he deserves to at least bump up a point. I think it's harder to bump up some of these higher guys because they already are so high, so you could kind of argue that Shedeur is playing somewhat within what his rating already is, but I do think he deserves a slight bump because he's been playing pretty well, and I think that should be recognized. And I think you could say the same thing about both Texas QBs. Quinn Ewers was playing really good until he got hurt, but I think you should still acknowledge what he did before he got hurt. He was definitely improved from last year. He was at about 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions when he went out. He definitely deserves a slight boost. Bump him up a point. I think you probably want to get him up there with where Shedeur is at least, because I think, if he didn't get hurt, I think his numbers would look really, really good right now, but he's missed a couple games. But regardless, we saw enough early on to say that, hey, he's an improved quarterback, so he should go up. But we gotta bump Arch Manning too. We've seen him play a couple games now, and he looks about as good as advertised. Now, did he make a couple mistakes here and there? Of course. He's a freshman. He's supposed to make mistakes, but he's also made some amazing throws. He's made the throws that you expect somebody of his hype to make. So again, I think you can go ahead and bump him up a point. Might have to even bump his speed a little bit. That run he had a couple weeks ago, showing off the speed, yeah, he's definitely faster than 76 speed. So I would definitely expect that speed to take a nice little bump. Now, I gotta talk about a player from my team because I'm biased. I got to pick out somebody from LSU. Now, you can look at Kyron Lacey or Garrett Nussmeier. I do think Garrett Nussmeier probably will jump up a point or so, but I want to talk about Caden Durham, the true freshman running back for LSU. He's been coming on the last few weeks. He's kind of taking over the lead back in that backfield. Emery went down with another injury. Williams still obviously touches the ball, but it seems like it's Durham's backfield to lose at this point because he's just been playing so well. Now, when you look at his stats on the year, it might not look like anything crazy. 244 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's got a couple of touchdowns receiving as well. 8.4 yard average. But he's really only played in the last 3 games. He didn't play in the first game of the year. He only got a few carries in the second game. And in the third game, they kind of finally turned him loose. And in those 3 games, he's averaging close to 10 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns on the ground, a couple through the air. This last game against South Alabama, on only 7 carries, he had 130 yards and a touchdown. And then he had 3 catches for about 90 yards and a touchdown. Guy has been lighting it up. Not a guy that needs to be like mid 80s or anything like that, but for a guy that is rated currently 76, what we've seen the last 3 games out of him, he's clearly better than that. So I would expect him to jump up a few points to get to the high 70s, maybe even a 80. We'll see how much love EA gives him, but the last 3 games when he finally got a chance to get on the field and show what he can do, he's definitely clearly the best back on the team. And as a true freshman, he's looking like a guy that I'm going to be able to enjoy watching for the next few years on this team. I want to show Dylan Gabriel some love as well. I do think you could argue at a 92 overall that he is kind of playing up to his overall, but I do think he'll get a bump, maybe a point or so. He's got about 1,200 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Look, I love a good touchdown to interception ratio. I like a quarterback that protects the ball, doesn't turn it over. He's been playing very well for Oregon. And he's also got 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. So another guy that I think needs some love, even if you just bump him up a point. But definitely a guy I did want to mention in the video. And I also got to shout out T-Mac of Arizona. He might be wide receiver 1 in this class as of right now. He's already rated pretty high at a 94 overall, so he might not get too much of a bump, but look, 29 catches, 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 17 yards a catch. He's been big play after big play. Again, like I said, might be the wide receiver 1 in this class when it's all said and done. I think he deserves to at least get bumped up a point. And again, look, I know there's a ton of players I can mention in this video, so if I didn't mention somebody from your team, it's not because I don't care or because I'm just intentionally leaving them out, but there's just too many players to go over, and I don't want this video to be an hour long. Now, recently, a bunch of cool stuff was added to College Football 25, and if you want to check out what that stuff was, make sure to check out this video right here on the screen.